The Jake Paul boxing experience rolled on Saturday in Puerto Rico, his adopted home, as Jake Paul was scheduled to be the co-main event in a card that he promoted under his most valuable promotions banner, scoring a first-round TKO of 35-year-old journeyman Ryan Bourland. Now, there were many other storylines that surrounded this evening of fights, including the fact that the main event never went off as Amanda Serrano, the 7-division champion and native of Puerto Rico, was unable to defend her trio of featherweight world titles against Nina Meinke as the fight was canceled just before the expected start of the main event, with Serrano, who's promoted by Paul, claiming an eye injury, forcing her to be unable to be cleared on this night. So the focus was on Jake Paul, but despite his ambitious quest through 10 pro fights to continue to get himself in line for legitimacy through the idea of an actual cruiserweight title shot, this second fight in just 78 days didn't do much to show us exactly where Jake Paul is at overall at age 27. Now, he outlanded Ryan Bourland 24-3 overall on a complete one-sided mismatch in which Paul showed an improved jab, used it to set up clean right hands to the body, and ultimately used looping right hands to cut through the guard of the Rhino, hurting Bourland each time he touched him and leading to cornering him with combinations until Bourland dropped down to one knee, forcing referee Luis Pabon to jump in at 2:47 of the opening round and wave off the fight without a count. Now, Paul's able to celebrate wildly and continue this streak now, which is 2 first-round finishes in less than 3 months span. If you go back to December when he did the same thing to Andre August in less than a round, just 15 seconds faster. Even though these fighters are commensurate in terms of the amount of total pro fights they've had, and in the case of Bourland, the tagline heading into this fight was Jake Paul fighting the most experienced pro boxer of his career. Neither of these opponents, whether it was August or Bourland in this case, were ready for prime time or really should have been in there at all. It was really the inactivity inside the fight which hurt Bourland, but how about the inactivity overall, having fought just once in 6 years coming in for a fighter who didn't turn pro until he was 25, did have an amateur background, but physically did not look like he was ready for prime time in this fight. Paul was all over him from the beginning, aggressive. He was certainly aggressive on the microphone afterwards as he called himself the face of boxing and even went as far as continuing his callouts for an eventual super fight with Canelo Alvarez. But here's really the larger question and issue. Alvarez is 2 divisions smaller than Paul, and certainly outside of financial opportunities wouldn't have any motivation to take that fight as it's a mismatch. The idea of Paul climbing the ladder and eventually becoming a legitimate cruiserweight title contender could happen, given how quickly he's evolved his skills from his original transition from a YouTuber and Disney acting star background into legitimate prize fighting. You got to give Jake Paul credit. He has shown the gains and the improvements, and they were on display in this fight. But until any real legitimate talk of him taking those big steps forward in the sport of boxing are going to happen, he's going to have to beat the type of foes who truly challenge him. When he did step up to that level last year in the form of Tommy Fury, the younger half-brother of heavyweight champion Tyson Fury, we saw Jake Paul push to the limit, losing a split decision, the only pro loss of his career, despite dropping Fury in the final round of that fight. For a 10-round scheduled cruiserweight bout, as this one was against Bourland, we didn't see Jake Paul need to get out of first gear. When we've seen him step up, he's lost to Fury. We've seen him handle easily many fighters that shouldn't have been in the ring with him, whether it was former NBA star Nate Robinson or any number of retired past their prime MMA foes. But for Jake Paul to continue to make the large claims of the idea of authoring one of sport's greatest stories of all time, of transitioning so easily from influencing to the fight game, he's going to have to step up that level of competition big time. You can get a certain amount of eyeballs up to a certain point on what you're doing, but when will the legitimacy kick in for Jake Paul? That's only going to come through stronger matchmaking. And even though they can make the argument that through 10 fights, maybe he's fighting the type of opposition that other rising young boxing prospects would fight up to this point just to gain experience, Paul's got more experience than that level, which really should mean he should demand more of himself. And where he's gained that experience was from the pay-per-view level, from being a star so quickly in the sport and crossing over. But when it comes to true legitimacy, that's only earned in the ring. And the type of fights we saw with Jake Paul taking on the Rhino on Saturday don't really do much in the big picture to push across any form of true legitimacy for the 27-year-old problem child.